how do you make a stock portfolio become cool? I mean, I can pull up my Rolls, my Tesla, you know, uh, whatever the car du jour or whatever. I can pull that up. That is cool. I can roll out my rims. That is cool.
Right.
How do you make a person's net worth, which is not something that people can readily see? You drive your somebodyness up to the front of a joint when you pull up, when you get out of it, when you roll it up to the curb and get out. That's you.
That's right.
You're marketing who you are. How do you do that with your holdings? How do you do that? That is what you have to do.
So, first of all, let me just thank you for this time. As I was looking at all the interviews, the accolades, the fact that you would take the time to have this conversation with us became even more gratifying.
Oh man, get out of here.
No, I have to say that. And, I really have to say that because um, a lot of people who've done a lot less are a lot harder to get to. You know what I mean? And a lot harder to engage in a conversation about what I consider to be important stuff. I'll just say this, as a representative of the Dream Exchange, this new Black-owned stock exchange, um, it is critical to us that we can engage people in such a way that they are inspired to believe that they really can do things that they may not believe they can do.
Okay.
And I think that your story, as much as any I've read or heard, um, is really that kind of inspiration because, nothing I've read would suggest that you started out on a journey to be the iconic individual that you turned out to be. But I think that's great because, I think people kind of think you wake up one day and you just really have this vision for your life and then you're on this path and you're just, headed in a linear kind of way to success. And it just does not happen that way.
It was just yesterday. I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember which one, but it asked the question of one of the members of that broadcast. It asked the question, "What would your 12-year-old self think if they saw you today? If you encountered that 12-year-old you now, how would they react?"
Wow.
And it actually brought tears to my eyes
Wow.
to think about that frightened lost little boy who had no idea what the hell was going on in the world, never thinking that he would become me. It was just, it's, I don't know why that was so moving to me, but boy, it just got to me because I just think of that little boy who had no real direction. He had no idea what advertising was or advertising. Well, he knew what advertising was. They didn't know what an advertising agency was.
Right.
And he had no sense of where he was going. Just wandering around from the periphery of one group to another periphery of another group, never fitting into any of them.
So when you took the aptitude test, from what I've read and heard, that was the turning point. The aptitude test was that in high school that you took that?
Yeah, that was the aptitude test that I took in high school. That was after I had a friend of mine who had been killed in a car crash in a car over the weekend, running away from the police. Now, I could have very easily have been in that car. All he had to do was invite me to hang out with him. But as much as he pushed me around and bullied me around, he also had a protective part. He didn't want me to be a part of that group, so he left me behind.
Mm,
And that Monday morning, going back to Inglewood, where we were in school, found out that he had been killed,
mm,
and that began to change my whole thing about, okay, I got to get this together. I mean, I got to do something different. So I changed high school and made a new set of friends.
mm.
And these people were aspirational. These people were people who were talking about being doctors and lawyers and stuff like that. And they became that
Wow.
good friend. And so what that did for me was to give me a whole different kind of perspective and a whole lot of catching up to do.
Mhm.
So as a part of trying to do that, I took a class called Careers. It was in the commercial division of the school. I mean, they had these courses called commercial, whatever, business class,
Mhm.
accounting, or whatever it is, typing. But they also had a thing called Careers, and the purpose of that course was to help people like me with no direction help find some direction. So it was an aptitude test that I took as a part in a class
Hmm.
that measured all the things, purportedly measured all the things that would tell you what you'd be good for and what you wouldn't be good for. So clearly, I wasn't good for a lot of those categories. I didn't do well in things mathematical, scientific, so forth. But I did have two spikes. One was called artistic, and the other one was called the other category was called persuasive. I'm sorry,
Persuasive. Oh,
Pers-
interesting. Interesting.
creative and persuasive.
Interesting.
But I took that information to my teacher, uh,
Mhm.
Miss Bulin. I'll never forget her.
Huh.
And so I took that to her. She says, "Well, you might want to think about advertising, especially as an advertising writer."
Hmm.
I said, "Well, tell me about that." And she said, "Well, those are people who use their persuasive skills and their artistic skills to try to persuade people to buy things." And
Mhm.
that's what it really, really intriguing to me. As I got into college, and when I say got into college, I mean talked and begged my way into college, uh, uh, and told my professor, advertising professor, that I wanted to be a copywriter, and he really tried to talk me out of it.
Oh, really?
Uh,
Why?
and I have to, well, he said, and he was being very kind. I think he said, I just want to let you know that your chances of succeeding in that business are close to nil because there just aren't any gateways. There are no such thing as black advertising
Oh,
executives.
well.
And
Valid point.
there was no black person working in the advertising agency industry anywhere in Chicago in any capacity,
Oh my god.
and never had been.
Wow.
So, but being kind of dense, I just went past that and just kept doing it anyway. And lo and behold, Don Brown, he was walking down the hallway at one of the agencies, because at that time, the only people who got through the doors of an advertising agency were the reps from the black
Mm.
media, particularly Johnson Publishing. So he's walking down the hall one day, and the office manager shot out of the office. They saw him, and they said, uh, "Do you know any young men, black young men, or Negro young men at that time,
Mhm.
who might be interested in coming to work here in the mailroom?" And it just so happened that he did.
Right.
So they went ahead and they hired me. Mailroom, $50 a week. I was off. I had a couple of funny stories. Uh, the chief financial guy was from over in the old country over in the Eastern
Hmm.
Europe somewhere, and with a little bit of an accent. So the first the Christmas party that I attended was soon after I got there, and so they were having the Christmas party and having the talent show and stuff. And he's a little short guy. He walked up to me. And you can see this. It's like almost like a New Yorker cartoon. He walks up to me and says, "Tom, we're so happy to have you here. Welcome here. And welcome to the company. Uh, but I'd like to ask you a favor. You know, next year when we do the talent show,
Oh,
could could you sing us some down home songs?"
oh my God. Oh, oh
So,
boy.
so I said, Laddie, his name was Laddie Francis. I said, down which home? I mean, what's I was born in Chicago. Lived in Chicago. So, they mean songs from my neighborhood. I mean, what, tell me. And he never got it. I almost wanted to put my arms around him.
Oh,
I said,
he didn't even. Oh, he just kind of
it, it,
okay
he meant no harm
at
whatsoever.
all. Right.
Not at all. Being
So
told,
tell us a little bit about where you went from Wade. I mean, you went from there. You obviously did a good job because you
yeah,
were
well,
able to go some of the
here's
top agencies in the country.
well, here's it had to do with how I got the job. I, what one of the great things that happened was getting to work in the mailroom.
Hmm.
That was a fantastic vantage point to learn the business.
Really?
Uh, you knew everybody's name, you knew where everybody was, you know all the departments. If you were
Oh,
studious, you learned what the departments did, the functions of the department. You knew who headed up all the departments, and you also knew the company's business because at that time we had mimeograph machines, and the
ooh,
people in the mailroom were in charge of all the memos, and then because we would copy them
ah,
and
right.
we would collate them and we would put them into the appropriate places depending on who they were going to. It was like we were trafficking the communications from one place to
Right.
another. And we were completely free. I was, at least, I gave myself the freedom to take a copy of whatever, make an extra copy of whatever memo I felt was valuable
Right.
for me to know. And I had a whole stack of memos that I would study and read and find out what the agency's problems were and where I might be able to fit myself in.
Mhm.
So I found out that they were having some problems with one of their products, Alka-Seltzer, which was their major product, and I went to work. I remember going over to Cabrini Green, and Cabrini Green was a whole different place back then in
Right.
the 60s, uh, and doing research. I had my little pegboard and made up a questionnaire and did research and all that kind of stuff. And then based on that research, I did some work. And so after I got my ideas kind of pulled together, I started to say, okay, let me go. Get in that way, put that stuff in the wagon. And that's the other great thing. You push that wagon around and you push that wagon with the mail in it past every office in the company.
Hmm.
So one day I'm pushing my wagon, my cart past the creative director's office. He was there. He was there by himself. And I invited myself in,
All
sat
right.
myself down, talked about the what I knew about the problem, and told him what I thought about what could be done about the problem. And then after having done that, I said, Bob, um, oh, wait a minute, I might have said Mr. Blackburn, but that's that. That's that. Uh, Let me ask you something. Does it make any sense for me to be pushing this wagon around when I can be sitting at a desk somewhere around here helping you solve your problem?
Mm,
And that was the accelerator. 2 weeks later, I was sitting behind a desk,
get out of
and
here.
as a junior copywriter. Uh, and when I say I was sitting behind a desk, I didn't say I was sitting in an office. I was sitting behind a desk. I was outside. I was sitting
So, so,
across. I was sitting across from the secretary. They were gone.
so they never really got credit for basically opening the door to black people in the advertising industry.
Well, the credit they got was the credit that I gave them because I was not at all shy about broadcasting
Okay,
where I came from.
good.
I mean, those people were amazing to me,
Yeah,
and,
it
and
sounds like it. I mean,
to this day, because maybe it's because I was in the mailroom, maybe my first time. I remember almost everybody's name. They had 120, 130 people there.
wow,
I knew them all,
wow.
and and Dwayne, this was not, people do this mad men kind of thing that advertising is really cool with,
Right.
these really hip people and stuff. This was a brown loafer, white sweat sock operation. I mean, these were regular people. These were people
Wow.
that, you know, from the suburbs. Uh, these were not cool hip people. These were just regular people, regular Eastern with Eastern European and other, kind of background. Uh,
Which
and
really makes it even more impressive because they weren't trying to impress anybody. They were really
yeah,
doing it because that's just who
those
they were.
they were the kind of people that you would envision in these neighborhoods working to keep black people out of the neighborhood from,
Right.
buying. They looked that,
Right.
but they couldn't have been nicer.
One of the reasons that I am so excited about the Dream Exchange is because this will be the first time that we can approach the economic circumstances of poor people from the top of the food chain. I mean, we'll be interacting with people who basically grease the skids of the American economy. And to the extent that we are taking on the role beyond that of a normal exchange to really dig in and do the work of demystifying capital, demystifying how you get it, you know, helping people to understand what's important and how to leverage money in much better ways than we currently do. Because it's not like we don't have money. We got $1 trillion in in the black economy alone. But the way we spend it, you know, is typical of someone who has no appreciation for how capitalism works. We are, and I know you've dealt with this in your anthropological studies and your books, and the extent to which we are seeking to adorn ourselves or to surround ourselves with all the things that make us feel better about who we are.
Give us our somebodyness. We
Right.
we talk about the somebodyness, yeah.
If we can really just take some of that attention and shift it to really focusing on and providing avenues for self-expression, as did finding out what's wrong. We may need to bring back that test and help people to figure out what they can do with their lives and then provide avenues. The benefit of the technology and the internet is that this is accessible to almost anybody. You can access this stuff on your phone. So,
Mhm.
I I'm convinced that it may take a couple of generations for us to work our way out of this. But one of the ways that's going to expedite that process is by putting the financial resources into building an infrastructure that supports that knowledge, learning how
Mhm.
to get money, learning what to do with it, and to really combine that with a sense of community and a sense of obligation to make sure that, you know, everything you make, every dollar you make, you need to be thinking about how you can not only improve your life, but the life of your community, the life of your children, your grandchildren. We have to get back to that. We used to think that way. And I think we can reverse a lot of that by creating very intentionally an avenue for enhancing our economic position and tying that to a sense of obligation that we've got to help each other work our way out of this. So that
I
ain't no
want,
short-term solution, but I
yeah,
think that it gets me up in the morning knowing that I can contribute something to a way out at some point.
I want you to be right, and
Come
I
on,
also
Tom. Come on, Tom. Woo, work with me here. Work with me.
I'm working with you. Hey, I want you to be right. I mean,
Okay.
I hope and pray that you're right. I want you to be right, and I want there to be a place for us to be and to exercise and capitalize on that increased knowledge. We've got to save the framework for what we're trying to advance into. We've got to save the framework because whether we're black or white or whatever it is, if we don't save the framework, what are we going to do with it?
Right.
You know, we've got to work on the and this is part of it. What you're talking about, the
Hmm.
long term plan for saving the framework so that we can succeed within that framework. So I think that as we are going through this process of, of planning for this progress, we also got to figure out a way to hold the framework together so that we will have a world, that we will have a planet, that we'll have a country that will be functioning, you know. So that means we've got to, at the same time, we're trying to move ahead with that. We've got to make sure that there will be a, a healthy, happy planet that we can function on. Not to mention, the country. So that's the thing that I'm asking everybody to do is to think about the big picture.
Hmm.
I mean, it's very much like what we do in the business, and how you start an agency. I mean, an idea starts with a concept and ends with an execution. And in between, there's strategy or tactics in between, but execution is the final thing. But if you have execution without a concept, then it's just an execution.
Right.
So we've got to have this plan that you speak of within the context and with the framework of a sane society. The advantage that your grandfather and my grandfather had is because we had practically nothing except our faith and our culture.
Right.
Fast forward, the culture, the valuable part of the culture is being stripped. We are addicted to entertainment, to amusement. There was a very interesting book by a guy named Portman who wrote it. I guess it's been reprinted a couple of times called, Amusing Ourselves to Death. And basically talking about how we are just, it's kind of a version of the frog in the boiling pot. I mean, we just get comfortable with our shows,
Hmm.
you know, our movies, our music, our records, and they're feeding us all this stuff that lulls us into not caring enough to get up and do something, and we don't want to give it up. We don't. We don't. We don't want to give up our shows. I'm getting dressed up and I'm going out and I'm going to have a good time. Don't ask me about the lyrics.
Well, let me say this because I think we can change this. It doesn't have to be that way. It really
Yeah.
doesn't. It's that way because we have basically been asleep at the switch
Mhm.
and let this happen to us. And
Yeah.
you know, and it'll never you'll never get everybody on the same page. You won't even get most people on that page. But if we could get 10%, a committed 10% of our country to really begin to believe and act on the belief that we can change this environment, we can change the conventional wisdom.
Mhm.
We can demonstrate that the dream exchange is going to be successful primarily because we're going to expand the market. We're not going to try to cannibalize the existing exchanges. We're going to expand the market. Only 8%, I think, was it 8% of black people have any kind of are invested in the market? Only 18% of white people are. Well,
Mhm.
that's nothing to brag about. That's
Mhm.
a lot of people who just don't get it, don't understand it, even though they may have resources to do something about it. There are hundreds of thousands of companies, hundreds of thousands. That seems to me to be a a pretty good marketplace to go after.
Mhm.
I don't count that well, but I can count that that well. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think that you know if we can do what you did in changing the mindset of people whose livelihoods were tied to those old notions and showing them that there was a new way that could be better for them,
Mhm.
then that's where the magic
And you
happens.
got to help to define better. So basically, what you're talking about is a very skillful, careful, massive marketing communications campaign to focus on the values that will lead to this outcome. You got to change values. You got to change what is
Right,
valuable to people. And that is a massive job that somebody needs to do. For
right,
instance, how do you make a stock portfolio become cool? I
hmm,
mean,
right,
I can pull up my Rolls, my Tesla, uh, you know, uh, whatever the car du jour or whatever.
hmm,
I can pull that up. That is cool. I can roll out my rims. That is cool.
right,
How do you make a person's net worth, which is not something that people can readily see? 'Cause you drive your somebodyness up into the front
right,
of a joint when you pull up when you get out of it when you roll it up to the curb and get out. That's you. you
that's right.
you're marketing who you are. How do you do that with your holdings? How do you do that? That is what you have to do. Man, look at this cat. You know what? You know, he's got $2 million in the bank. He just invested in a stock that just went from here to there. Man, he is cool.
And
That's
he's driving a Ford.
my man. Yeah, that
Right,
whole inverse correlation.
right.
This cat is so smart that he's driving a car that's 12 years old. Man,
Well, Tom, I really believe, and I guess this is where my sense. I think we're going to have to start educating our kids. I don't know that we can
yeah,
change people with. We got to start with the kids.
but you know what? We could have said that 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and you know what
And we'd
people
have
say?
been
We
there.
don't have time for that. We don't have, you always have time to do it right.
Right.
Because if you don't do it right, you're going to wind up having to go back and try to do it right later on.
Right. Well, as we wrap this up, I want to give you a chance if there are any parting messages or ideas or wisdom you want to share with us.
I would suppose that you might have what you're doing may have some connection with people starting businesses and running businesses successfully.
Hmm.
And as you know, a lot of people try to start business or think about starting businesses and they just don't have a real clue as how to finish a business. I mean, how to get it up and make it go. And there are lots of things that can be said about that. Having the right product, having having a product that has a uniqueness to it. When I
Hmm.
say product, I mean whether it's advertising or an advertising approach or a bottle of liquid or something. You
Right.
know, um, and to be sure that you don't fall in love with your own ideas. Be the harshest critic of your own ideas. Because if you don't go take it through those challenges, you will fail.
Right.
Because if you're busy trying to defend it just because you came up with it, then you're not scrutinizing it sufficiently to have it survive out there in the marketplace.
Right.
You know. And then the other thing I would just basically touch on is that I had relatives who always said, "I want to open up a joint." I mean, the whole idea right is owning a tavern or a liquor store, and I want to have my own joint. I had some uncles who would say that I want to have my own joint, and what that meant was opening up your establishment so that you could walk into your establishment, with your head high and sharp, and putting your hand up on the counter with your ring,
Thank you. Right.
dancing, and setting up the bar, and I had one relative he would always talk about opening up a joint, and then he managed to open one up, and then he spent most of his time going out to other joints while to talk about the fact that he had a joint.
Right.
So you know the the whole idea of this stuff is work. It's thinking. It's thinking through strategy, making sure that you've got a unique selling proposition. Make sure that just because you have something that is unique doesn't mean that it's something that is sellable, because maybe it's a uniqueness that nobody cares about, or maybe a uniqueness that has a cost to it that isn't worth it to people to pay. And and the the idea of managing, and it's kind of related to the guy with the joint, is that people get to a point of being in management, owning their own stuff, and they forget that they're not just about showing off their power,
Hmm.
the power of having achieved that point, because you got to have people working for you. You got to have people
Mhm.
working for you. One of the biggest problems I think that managers make is that they forget how to manage themselves, or maybe they never learn. You
Hmm.
got to manage yourself first, and that means being disciplined, being restrained when you need to be, knowing when to step out, know when to step back, knowing how to identify, recruit, retain, motivate people to help you grow your business.
Right.
And, I mean, there are lots of, I mean, we could take a whole half hour just to talk about that stuff,
Right.
the idea of what is the purpose of a business, and why should you exercise some of these restraints. Well, wait a minute, I own this company, it's about me,
No,
and
that's
I'm
right.
here to manage you, and I'm here for you to help me run my business, as opposed to I'm here to help you run my business.
Right.
you know so that's a whole book. I'm sure that other people are more capable of writing, but it's something that I saw and I learned, along the way, and I've learned that you don't have to create a concept, but you do have to identify that concept, adopt that concept, adapt that concept, and develop that concept, and develop the human resources and the infrastructure necessary to make that concept into an execution that is effective.
Yeah. But this is the other thing I want to address before I let you go, and that is one of the things that I admire most about what you've done that doesn't, I think, get talked about as much is the fact that you transitioned out of your company and brought in people who could run that company, who were true to your vision, as best I can tell. For them to still be thriving and still be a force in the industry. And we don't do that very well. We get bought out, we go out of business, all kinds of things. But the fact that Burrell Communications continues to thrive, and that you handpicked those successors who really embraced and understood what the company stood for and have stayed true to its ideals, is the best I can tell. Um, that's a story in and of itself, and that is not the rule. That is absolutely the exception of what goes on. So
Can, can,
speak a little bit to that, because I think that's really important for people to
can,
appreciate.
can, can I speak to that? I actually just spoke to it, because when I talk about principles of management,
Mhm.
managing people, it's very difficult for people who own things and run things and found things to let go
Right.
and to say, my job is to do nothing except pick the right people to come into this place, give them some guidance along the way, allow them to grow, give them the ability to make decisions, give them the authority that's necessary to make decisions, give them a sense of accountability, and let them go, and understand that there are other ways to be right other than your way to be right. I mean, there's more than one way to be right. And also that you learn from making mistakes, allow people to make some mistakes,
Right.
and let them grow. Because if it all comes from that philosophy of staying out of the way. If you give people, I worked in general market agencies, and the
Mhm.
supply demand was the other way around. So if I didn't write the ad, there was somebody else who was going to write it.
Right.
If you tell people that if you don't write this ad, it ain't going to be written, you know, and so it's on you. I want I'm going to hire you, and I'm going to give you more than you think you're capable of,
Mm.
and I'm going to try to motivate you to grow up into your potential.
Wow.
I'm not trying to suppress you. I'm trying to get you to do more. I want you. If you're a secretary, I need executive producer. That's what I need, because we don't have any. Can you think? Can you get to there? You know,
Mhm.
our business depends on that.